God's species of leadership, a divine blueprint for restoring the soul of nations. Chapter 1. The Heart of a Leader, the Anatomy of Motive. We cannot truly grasp the concept of leadership until we dare to interrogate the motive. Why do people lead? Every human action is propelled by an internal engine, a drive, a hunger, a motivation. No one seeks leadership in a vacuum. There is always a why behind the ambition. However, I consider it a sociological and spiritual aberration if the primary preoccupation of a leader is merely to issue commands and enjoy the perquisites of the office. Tragically, across the African continent, this aberration has become the norm. Leadership has become a career path for the vain, a retirement plan for the greedy, and a playground for the power-hungry. In stark contrast, true leadership, the kind demonstrated by Jesus Christ and the patriarchs of the faith, is rooted not in the head, but in the heart. It is the servant's heart. If we were to perform a forensic audit of the heart of Jesus, we would discover that the reason he became a leader over his small group of followers was not to usurp power, bark orders, or bask in the adulation of the crowd. His style reveals a profound truth. Leadership is not the pursuit of personal glory. It is the willingness to serve others, often at great personal cost. The lost concept of personal cost. Personal cost. This phrase has become a foreign language to the modern leader. In our contemporary world, and specifically within the developing nations, leadership has been conflated with privilege, control, and absolute authority. Those in power view themselves not as stewards, but as gatekeepers of resources, using their offices to advance narrow, selfish interests. Positions are occupied for self-aggrandizement. The office is treated as a personal ATM to satisfy private lusts. This explains the grotesque paradox of Africa. We have super-rich leaders presiding over super-poor citizens. Our leaders have successfully engineered two distinct, parallel societies within the same borders: the obscene opulence of the ruling class and the crushing poverty of the masses. This self-serving mindset is the root of the protracted corruption, injustice, and inequality that suffocates our potential. It is a dangerous game. This disconnect creates social tension, political volatility, and economic instability that threaten the very cohesion of the state. We saw the symptoms of this in the Arab Spring that swept through Libya, Egypt, and Tunisia. We saw it closer to home in the #AnsArs protests of 2020 in Nigeria. These were not random events. They were reactions. When leadership fails, the people eventually react. Yet, it seems our leaders remain blind to the volatility of the people they lead. The grand illusion of office. Leadership is a burden of responsibility. I often wonder if those vying for office have ever paused to meditate on the weight of that burden before printing their campaign posters. Let us be clear. Occupying a political office does not make you a leader. Leadership is defined by influence. How much positive change can you inspire in the people? What is the perception of the people about you? To be brutally honest, in this part of the world, leaders do not care. Their strategy is simple. Occupy the office, waste 4 years in mental laziness while the people suffer, and then return to beg for re-election. And if begging fails, they simply rig their way back into power to secure a second term. When we weigh this mercenary approach against the leadership of Jesus, the contrast is not just stark, it is condemning. While contemporary political leaders are self-seeking, placing their survival above the survival of the state, Jesus' approach was revolutionary. It was radically people-centered, prioritizing the other over the self, served with a garnish of humility, sacrifice, and compassion. The Jesus Manifesto, a redefinition of greatness. Jesus Christ offered the ultimate masterclass on leadership. In Matthew chapter 20, verses 26 to 28, he dismantled the world's hierarchy. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Here, Jesus redefines greatness. In a world that prizes wealth, status, and power, he points to an entirely different path, the path of descent. The greatest leader is not the one at the top of the pyramid looking down. It is the one at the bottom, bearing the weight of others. This is the essence of servant leadership, selfless service to humanity. Can any of our current leaders vouch that they came to office of the people and for the people? Whenever they make false claims, as they usually do, we should ask them, where is the scar? Where is the sacrifice? What price are they paying to make life bearable for the common man? In my country, Nigeria, leaders draft harsh economic policies that drive millions into the abyss of extreme poverty. Then, with a straight face, they ask the starving citizens to be patient. These are impatient leaders preaching patience. They cannot delay their own gratification. They budget billions for food and medical tourism at the State House, while citizens languish under the hardship their policies created. They acquire private jets and yachts, changing luxury cars as frequently as they change clothes. They love the theory of sacrifice as a slogan for the poor, but never apply it to their own lives. If they believe in patience and sacrifice, why are they not the first to practice it? Jesus was different. He did not just preach. He embodied the message. Once, he was found at the feet of his disciples, washing their feet. John chapter 13, verses 1 to 17, an act which, in the cultural context of his time, was reserved for the lowest servant. Yet, Jesus, who was the Son of God, did not hesitate to humble himself in this way. He never enjoyed anything at the expense of his followers. He ate what they ate, slept where they slept. There was no distance between the master and the disciple. It was a relationship of close friendship, not a master-servant hierarchy. Now, I am not naive. I do not expect modern politicians to possess the divine character of Jesus. Nor am I oblivious to the fact that this leadership rot has infiltrated the church, the very body of Christ that should know better. My goal is to address leaders in all ramifications. We must learn from the master. The semantics of service versus reward. We need to reclaim the word service. Today, the word is more rhetorical than practical. Nobody emphasizes reward in their discussion of leadership. It is usually service they talk about. Businesses talk about products and services. But in the political arena, when they say service, they actually mean reward. When a politician says, "I want to serve you," he does not mean he wants to be your servant. He means, "I want to be rewarded for occupying this office." Even in the civil service, the underlying motivation is often the paycheck, not the patriotism. This is why strikes are rampant when pay is delayed. True service is a twin brother to sacrifice. Whether we know it or not, leadership is about serving people. Unfortunately, the modern society is designed by laws such that it is the people who serve their leaders, rather than leaders serving the people. People die to enter political office in Africa not to serve, but to access the rewards. The benefits are so enormous and so shrouded in secrecy that, in Nigeria, the monthly take-home pay of a senator is one of the nation's most guarded secrets. They are afraid to talk about it in public. It is unimaginable. In what business does the employer, the people, not know what the employee, the politician, earns? Such a business is running a risk of insolvent bankruptcy. The business of running our nation is in danger because we are in perpetual darkness regarding the earnings of those who claim to serve us. We must investigate the drive and motivation behind our leaders. Do they want to serve us, or do they want us to serve them? The philosophy of hatred, the failure of identification. Beyond the theft of national wealth, I believe African leaders have added a darker strand to their sins. Hatred. Hatred for the people and the systems they created themselves. It is a harsh accusation, but let us examine the evidence. When a public office holder falls ill, the next attempt is to go shopping for medical tourism abroad. They send their children to foreign universities, spending millions in hard currency, rather than fixing the educational system they preside over. A key quality of a true leader is identification. A leader who refuses to be identified with the people he leads is an imposter. Why do our leaders enjoy services abroad while forcing their followers to use the dilapidated systems at home? In my opinion, when a leader bypasses the hospitals and schools he created to use foreign ones, it is clear evidence that he hates the country he is leading. My judgment may be wrong, but if the UK Prime Minister traveled to Germany every time he had a headache, the British public would revolt. He would be forced to duplicate the German standard in the UK. So why don't African leaders replicate what they admire in London or Dubai back home? The only logical answer is hatred. Indeed, average African leaders hate their people. The power of condescension. Let's look at the ultimate example of identification. When the soldiers came to arrest Jesus in Gethsemane, they couldn't identify him. They needed a betrayal, a kiss on the cheek. Why? Because he looked exactly like his followers. He was so mingled and interwoven with their lives, eating their food, wearing their clothes, that separation was impossible. When will our leaders learn this level of condescension? I am not suggesting leaders must vacate their luxury apartments and live in the ghetto. I am suggesting they must transform the ghetto into a livable environment because they feel the pain of those who live there. Consider Moses. He lived in the lap of luxury in Pharaoh's palace, an heir to the throne of the greatest empire on earth. He didn't need the Israelites, but for the sake of heaven, he forfeited the throne to identify with a suffering people. He chose to suffer affliction with the people of God rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Hebrews chapter 11 verses 24 to 27. Consider Nehemiah. He was comfortable in the Persian palace, yet the news of Jerusalem's broken walls broke him. When he became governor, he did something radical. He rejected the security vote, the constitutional provision for the governor's food and allowance. It was his legal right to take it. Previous governors had taken it. But Nehemiah knew that while it was constitutionally right, it was morally wrong because the people were suffering. Compare this to Nigeria, where leaders feed fat on the taxes of the poor to finance outrageous salaries. It is legal, yes, but is it moral? The collapse of empathy and the democratic curse. We need leaders with empathy. Leaders who do not close borders to food importation while internal conflict prevents farmers from farming. Leaders who care more about human hunger than balance of payment statistics. Shame on the leaders who do not feel the sufferings of the people. We need leaders like David, who gathered the distressed, the indebted, and the discontented, and gave them hope. 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 1 to 2. Instead, we have leaders whose policies strip the purchasing power of the citizens and render them economically impotent. We need leaders who take responsibility. When David sinned, he said, "I have sinned." Our leaders blame everyone else, their predecessors, the weather, God, but never themselves. Because of this lack of character, our democracy has become a sham. We choose leaders based on the highest bidder, not competency. The 2023 election in Nigeria will go down in history as a fraudulent exercise, described by international observers as substandard. It is tragic that democracy, which we fought for with blood and sweat since 1992, is now being viewed as a curse. People look back at the early days of the Fourth Republic, 1999 to 2007, with nostalgia because, despite the flaws, life was better than the misery of today. The frustration is so high that some, seeing the coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, are tempted to call for the military to return. I disagree. Military rule is a non-starter. However, we must face the hard truth. The present democratic system in Nigeria is not sustainable. It requires a complete overhaul. If we do not renegotiate our existence and address these plaguing problems, we will not just fail, we will consume ourselves.